watching too many bloopers of newsreels.
Okay. Hey everybody, I'm Eric Sorensen. I am the organizer of MadJS. We want to say thanks to Wyden for the Qdoba and for hosting. Thank you. Do we have any announcements? Jobs, stuff like that, events? Anybody? No?
Wyden is always accepting applications for QA testers, front-end developers, that sort of thing. This is our development space. We have beer normally, but someone killed the keg recently. Lots of other things. So it's kind of fun to work here. If you're interested, go to wyden.com/careers or talk to one of us.
Okay, thanks. So next month is going to be ECMAScript 6. I'm looking forward to that. And we've also been talking about having another night at the UW. Was anybody there for that? Where we went to the UW and we basically gave here's what your professors are not telling you about being a developer in the real world. You know, stuff like source control and working on a team and legacy code, all of this stuff that when you get out of college just kind of it blindsided me at least. So we're trying to maybe get one of those things together again. If anybody has any connections with the UW or knows anybody that could help us put something like this together, come talk to me after the meetup. I think that's all I had tonight. We're gonna I think they're just finishing up with the food, and then we can have everybody get food, and then we can start with the presentations. Anything else anybody wants to talk about? All right, thanks.
Careful to record.
Should I almost careful?
No, I mean, you will.
Oh yeah. Careful for the.
We can disconnect it for now too.
We're pulling the tops off the food, so it should be ready momentarily.
Okay. Cool. Should we disconnect that?
We can. Yeah, it's fine. Stop the recording. You get to splice. Yeah, it's been something I've been up to for a little time.
Anchorlets die way faster.
Alright, good. Good to go. Hey guys, my name is Michael Beil. I am a coffee dev and a web addict. And that's just a fun little saying that I found, and I'm like, I want to use that, so I'm using it now. So I'm going to be talking about accessibility. A11Y is what it's known as. So how do we know if our web projects are accessible? And for all the social stuff, you can hashtag A11Y, mention MadJavaScript and me. This morning I had sent out a tweet. I was just saying, what's the number one thing regarding web accessibility that you would want people to know about? And I got a couple of responses. Ray, who works here, he said that he was excited. He wants to write accessible web apps first and foremost, and using HTML correctly, following the semantics of HTML. And then Greg Tarnoff said, well, I wish I could make it, but he can't come. So a client-side MVC usually means adding in default HTML functionality and ARIA, which we will talk about later, ARIA. So, everybody just relax. Web accessibility can seem overwhelming a bit. It's like, come on, I have to add another thing to this project already. But it's really worth it in the end, especially when you have, maybe it's only one user that gets the benefits of it. So here are a couple things that I'm going to talk about. So WCAG, Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, is currently on version 2. They're working on 3.0, but in W3C, that is the standard right now. And so it's a good resource for accessibility, but it's super difficult to interpret sometimes. So why don't we just make like a simple yes or no checklist, an easy way to check with free tools that are available to all of us within our browsers, how we can make our applications accessible. So there are 4 principles of accessibility. First is it's perceivable. You can make web content available for the senses, like sight, sound, touch, until smell-o-vision. And then the most practical way to achieve this is to provide text alternatives for any non-text content. The second one is operable. It's making interface elements operable, like forms and control and navigation. The biggies here are making keyboard navigation available. Number 3 is understandable, making sure that the content in UI is understandable, that the UI 101, just going into the accessibility or not. If somebody's having to guess about where to click, then the design is a failure. And then number 4 is robust. Content can be used reliably by a variety of user agents, including assistive technologies. And just the bottom line here is always strive to conform with the current coding standards. So here's a quick note. There are 4 major categories of disability types. There are visual, like blindness, low vision, color blindness. There's hearing, deafness, and hard of hearing. There's motor, like inabilities to use mouse, slow response time, limited fine motor control. And then there's cognitive, like learning disabilities, distractibility, ADD, I think I suffer from that sometimes. Inability to remember or focus on large amounts of information. Fortunately, I can still move around myself personally well enough that I can use like this normal laptop without a much need for accessible things. But these are great things to take note about. So just going to cover, a few of the common accessibility issues. And what I want you to get out of this is that if you can answer some of these questions correctly, your site, your app is going to be more accessible than many others out there. And if you want to get into all the legal rigmarole, you can go to this website, section 255, 504, and 508, and kind of check into that of what the requirements are according to those particular amendments. All right, so let's get into some of this stuff. Keyboard interaction. So let's say when a user comes to your website, can they easily access all parts of the site with a keyboard only? I don't know if you've ever done this, but like gone to a website or an app and tried to tab through everything and see if it will work. Like if you've got a drop-down menu, can the keyboard focus in on what the tab is on? So like here, for instance, when you hover over the drop-down menu and see how the outreach is now hovered over and it's in focus with the tab, that's a bad one actually, because it has not dropped down into the drop-down menu. So this is what we would call an accessibility fail. So like these are a couple of examples on how the keyboard interacts with our code. Like if we do a hover and a focus and then have a background on it, that's going to allow the user who's keying in to see that it's in focus. Instead of doing something like an outline none, they're not going to be able to see that it's in focus. And then we've also got a selector within jQuery where when we're hovering over that, we can focus in and out on that. So those are just a few quick examples of how we can make sure that users are able to interact with the web things that we're up to. Here is another example of a drop-down menu. I work a lot with WordPress, so this is 2014. If you're familiar with that from WordPress, it's one of the standard themes. that comes with WordPress. And they make sure to make everything accessibility ready. And so this was a pass. Okay, another question is, can I easily access all functionality with the keyboard only? And does a keyboard tab order make sense? Okay, so let's say we've got a light box on a page and the user would have to click into it, but in this case, what remains in focus is actually in the background. So when you tab into it, it's actually not showing the image. So if this was a blind user, they wouldn't be able to see the alt tag or anything like that that's connected with the image. So then they'd be like, well, I have no idea what's going on. I cannot use this page. I don't know what's happening. So that was a fail. Then this is something that was a while back in WordPress that was a fail, but within the media modal pop-up, when a user would tap through that, it's since been fixed, but they weren't able to see what was in focus there. Okay, next, some stuff about links. Are the links obviously links? So here, for instance, I don't know what it looks like up there, but can you tell where the links are on that? It's a really light green, but it's, to somebody who might be colorblind, that could be super difficult for them to be able to focus in on those links. Do the links provide enough information? Like you can add your alt tag to the link itself. And so this is an instance of a software called NVDA, which is a screen reader, and it allows the user who is blind to be able to know what's going on the page, so that when they are focused in on the edit button, it says edit. But in this case, there were a couple things wrong with that. All right, what about media stuff? Can you answer yes to any of these in your projects? Do all images have appropriate alt text? So that's just the alt equals quotations, and whatever in your quotations is the alt text. And in WordPress, it's pretty easy to add it in. Otherwise, in just HTML, it's just alt equals. And then, do all videos have captions? Okay, next is signposting your content. Can you answer yes to any of these? Are the page titles unique and meaningful? Do pages have appropriate headings and subheadings? And then are the ARIA landmark roles present? There's that ARIA again. Okay, so the headings, like in NVDA screen reader, it would list from H1 all the way down what's going on in the page. So if you, let's say, start out a page with H2, it might confuse a reader who's using that, because they're like, well, what is the main line of this page? I don't see any H1. And so that's what NVDA does. It just kind of shows the reader what's going on within that particular web app or website. So now here, this is what's called ARIA, which is Accessible Rich Internet Applications. So this has to do kind of like with a general look of what web apps appear. So you'll have your banner, you got your navigation, you've got your content, you've got your sidebar, and your footer. And within these roles, we've got, what the roles are equal to. It's navigation, the complementary, the content info, what have you. Next we've got text. And this is a really interesting one. Can you resize text in a page without breaking the layout? This is an example of a little help area within an application. And when you go to increase the size, look what happens. That was a fail. Can you answer no to this one? Is any of the text fully justified? Like here. Or there. We've got these rivers of white space. That was another fail. Okay, so what we want to get out of this is input from our users. Like, we want to not have angry users, and we don't want them to have mixed emotions about our application. We want them to be able to reach for the stars. We want them to be able to do what they came to do with our app. Here's the next question. See if you can answer yes to this when you think about something that you might have created. Do all the form fields have an accompanying label? So this is within Firefox using the Wave toolbar. And you see the form and the fields are labeled. And then there's another one with no labels. And then this is what it would look like when you examine it. So the right one is bad, the left one is good. Okay, another thing that's interesting to look at is the color and the shape. Is the color contrast sufficient? If you look at this map, you can tell that Europe is highlighted, but is it sufficient enough to somebody who might not be able to see that color very well? So there's this awesome little color contrast analyzer tool that you can grab and see if it passes or if it fails. Also, just I'll look at another form and what it can look like with a color contrast. And see if you can answer no to this one. Is meaning conveyed by the color or the shape only? Like, we've got a project name, it's easy, it's go. We've got a tricky project, maybe we're going to be hesitant on it, but we've got the resources for it. Then we're thinking, yeah, I'm definitely glad I'm not on that project, but everything's going okay on another project. So all that to say is we can collaborate on this, and I think it's a great opportunity to connect with our community. There's a lot of people who are currently working on accessibility and helping make this priority in their web projects that we forget no one, and we can just kind of look at this little example quick. I just came across this today, interestingly enough. It's called pickadate.js, and I had noticed in their features they are ARIA enabled and totally WCAG 2.0 compliant. So I was like, that's awesome. Alright, so now I wanted to show just a little demo of some of these tools that I was just talking about. So here is Wave evaluation tool. This is just in Chrome. So I'm a big fan of rugby, And so if you go to the Rugby Six Nations website and you just tap on Wave, you'll get this little pop-up that does not seem to be working. Okay, there we go. And you notice we've got a bunch of errors. Here we've got 32 errors and 650 alerts going on. So something is up with this. So it looks like we've got some alt text missing, we've got some form labels missing, we've got empty links, just a bunch of stuff that looks like it needs to get cleaned up. And then if we go to Firefox, I'll show you the verge on here. And this is the Wave toolbar just within Firefox. It's a little bit different, but pretty much the same. So here it just kind of shows you exactly what's going on the page. You can hover over what's going on and determine, is that something that really needs to be fixed? Is that something that's going to cause a user with a screen reader to not be able to read it, and what have you. So here are a couple great useful resources, and I can make this available online too. I'll just post it up to the MadJS Meetup group page so everybody can have access to it. There's a Wave toolbar, and then of course you just inspect element gadgets within the browser. And my friend who kind of helped me piece all this stuff together, he's got some stuff on his own website. He does accessibility consulting. So there's a few great links for looking more into coding forms and getting alt text right, and then creating text for screen readers alone. So yeah, thanks for listening, and anybody got any questions right off the bat? Yeah.
We actually last week were trying to work on what the keyboard interaction should be for like a flyout menu. So are you saying, I think your example showed that, is it kind of expected that when you actually apply focus to the trigger element that the menu should open? Is that the best way to do it?
Yeah, exactly.
Instead of like having to press enter or something, or an arrow key?
Yep.
Just have it open
Yeah.
up? Okay.
Yep.
We of course didn't do it that way. So
Yeah, it's
we'll have to
all
go back and revise.
it's all
but-
part of the planning.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of like you get used to it. Like after you have internationalized stuff. Yeah, I've got a couple of these in there. Yeah, after you kind of internationalize things, I mean, that becomes a part of your project. After you start integrating accessibility, it just gets easier and easier and easier every time. Yeah.
What's the
So,
problem with the fully justified text with the white spaces?
well, to a potentially blind person, maybe the justification, I'm not entirely sure, but perhaps it's more so with color blindness that happens, where their eyes might not be able to focus, or the distraction type of people, that it just causes too much of the gappage.
Question?
Yeah.
So, in working on single-page applications, I find it's very tricky to know when to use ARIA and when to rely on emerging HTML5 elements. It seems like a lot of things in ARIA were developed to sort of bridge the gap, to provide things like landmark information, and now with HTML5, there are things like the nav element.
Right.
And there are times when if you use the ARIA property on an HTML5 element that is already being essentially given that property by an adaptive tool like a screen reader, you can actually confuse it.
Yeah.
You can put too much information into it. Have you found, I've had a hard time finding good resources for sort of explaining or giving advice about how much ARIA to use and in what cases. Have you found any resources like that in your work?
I think that it would depend perhaps on the application. Like, are you only running HTML5? Or I mean, I should say, was it only ever running HTML5? Or was
it's
it
something
once
it's something that's being developed from scratch.
it's being developed from scratch? Yeah.
It's greenfield, so.
I would say that if you are confident in your HTML markup, that I would go with that
Right.
and start there instead of, like you were saying, confusing the screen reader with adding both
Right.
to them. Yeah. Yeah.
So, in your experience, are there some front-end frameworks that are better than others that are more accessible? Or that you know that people are actively trying to improve them?
Yeah. Like underscores and foundation. Well, those are more like theme frameworks. But yeah, and when I was looking into Bootstrap, I thought I heard something that there were some issues there, but I haven't looked into that more deeply, so I couldn't talk to you about Bootstrap specifically. Yeah. Was there another one that you had in mind?
There's just when I evaluate these type of things.
Yeah.
When you just start a project and you want to have to go back and change anything.
Right.
So it's kind of nice. I know that Bootstrap has recently started to really try to improve accessibility. But there's still really some stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are there anything that we need to like keep in mind if you're building, single page apps with like Angular or something like that? Like, I know there was a time where, people were like, well, screen readers can't really handle a lot of the JavaScript, but it seems like they've gotten a lot better.
Yes, they have. I mean, if you've got, it's going to be spitting out HTML in the end in the single page web app. So if you've got your HTML headings going on, you've got all that markup ready, then you should be fine in the end for that user.
What about like with forms? Because obviously with doing stuff like Angular, a lot of it is you're just identifying that stuff has changed and working with that. Like, how does that affect it if you're not using normal like submit tags and?
Yeah, like when you're using Ajax inside of Angular, those kind of things. That's something that I'm delving into, so I cannot give you a complete answer on that right now. Yeah. So I think we had another person who wanted to give some demos. Oh, you got another question? Okay.
Yeah. So you mentioned Wave. Is that the tool that you use? Like, say you're going to jump on a project and do some work on a WordPress site, right? And you don't know if it's accessible or not, but you aim to make it such. Is that the tool you'll go to first?
Yeah, that's definitely a go-to
What's that?
tool. Yeah, that's a go-to.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And what about some others? I mean, did you mention them in the thing?
Yeah, there are a couple others, like the color contrast inspector, and even if you don't have the extension, you can actually go to the Wave website and just enter in a site there, and it will give you an entire listing of what's going on with it. Yeah. Anybody else? All right. Do we want to get disconnected?
Got one more presentation.
John, would you grab my?
I don't know if there's like a shortcut to at least go back to top.
Yeah.
No, I would like to have something that works in Markdown.
I got a lot of
So,
Be prepared. I'm gonna get started because I don't want to keep you all here later than
it's harder to
need be.
Yeah.
Because I was kind of a late addition. Eric was
I know, yeah.
courteous enough to add me to it when I asked if I could come and do a 10-minute spiel. It was really good to see Michael here. I totally forgot, his face when I come walking by, and I'd seen him before. He's an excellent musician. If you ever get a chance to hear him play, he plays hammered dulcimer. Really good. Don't know where he's gonna be playing next, but maybe I'll find out after. So I'm really excited to be here tonight to tell you about. This is my first talk about a product I've been working on for several years. And it was something that I started when I was working as a software engineering manager over at Land's End. And I was taking a lot of notes, and I was having trouble keeping track of all the to-dos I had because, when you work for a company like that, you've got a million projects going on. And you're writing things down on paper, you're checking things off, you're putting them into a spreadsheet, you're doing all kinds of crazy stuff. I've heard people doing all kinds of nutty, misoginations around how to keep and manage their stuff. But one of the principles I was trying to hold to when I was doing that was that, you shouldn't have to leave your work to modify the to-dos and tasks that you have. And developers have been doing that for years. So one of the first questions I want to ask you guys is, so I'm opening the tool now to show you. This is where I put the presentation for it. But so how many of you have use now or have seen to-do comments in code? Pretty much everybody, right? I mean, it's pretty commonplace. You'll see a to-do or a fix me, something just to come back and look at this. Nine times out of 10, those things get forgotten. If someone puts it in, you forget about it. You're like, what was that? And that's mostly because the tools just don't exist to really manage that well for you. There's static analysis tools that when you're doing a build process, it'll pull them out, show you what's going on, show you your list of to-dos, fix me's, whatever. And then there's, IDE plugins that you might use, like Eclipse, I think, has a to-do manager at the bottom. You can filter for certain things. But let's face it, I mean, they're just not the kind of tools we use today. I mean, most people are used to using something like Trello or Pivotal Tracker or something like that to manage their tasks. And a big project's going to do that. You're gonna have that no matter what. So, developers have been doing it for years, and the modern dev process needs some kind of task board or management console or something like that. So, I wanted to write code for documentation and manage tasks without opening other apps. I told you that before. It gets to be too much. You want to stay focused. You want to have context when you're viewing and you're doing your work. You don't want to jump out. So, what I came up with was a way to go and find these comments and these tasks in your code, but anywhere. They could be in any file. It could be a text file. It could be a Markdown file. And so, for example, this is a Markdown file. This is just a readme.md, which just about every project has. If you're on GitHub, that they kind of force you down that path, which I think is a great thing. You should have a little bit of documentation about your code. So I just created a quick little task in here. And it was just, let's put it in the doing list, right? So the date is just the create date at the beginning, MadJS presentation, give it a little, it's hard to read because it's so small up there, but give it a little tag and a due date and another little piece of metadata, a couple pieces of metadata. You don't have to do that, but then it creates something in the doing list. So right now it looks pretty basic and there's not much here, but you can imagine on a bigger project what it would look like. So task formats are pretty simple in here. It's to do this as a task, right? We're all used to seeing that, just the same simple to do. And no matter what language you're in, if it's part of the spot, if it's configured in the app, then you'll be able to find the comments. To do : I've seen a lot of that as well.
to do :5 is another format. That's just or colon a number. That's just another format so that we know where to put it in the sort. And then there's hash style. And this is what I default to once I've read these and they get moved. Okay, if they drag and drop these tasks around, we'll go to this hash style, which is a hash, the list name, colon a number, and then the task text. And then there's Markdown style, which is kind of a holdover from something I was working on a while back when I first started this idea that these things would be in Markdown files because they were going to be in notes, and that's what I was needing at the time. But it works too, so because it's already a Markdown anchor. If you're used to Markdown, you recognize that format. So task syntax is pretty basic. You just have a list name with a colon separating it and a sort order, and then your text. But what makes this really interesting is that you can add some things to that text. So for instance, you can add some Markdown formatting. You want to bold something, just use Markdown formatting. Another piece of that, who here is familiar with to-do.txt? Never heard of that one? One person? I knew there'd be at least one. So that's a very simple syntax for managing tasks in one file. So if you're a developer, you're somebody who's used to using a text editor, it's really easy to just manage some tasks in a text file rather than having to open up some big app and hit a button to create a task. You can just type. Your fingers don't have to leave the keyboard. And there's some pretty basic rules around to-do.txt. I've got a couple links for them here, and I'll share with you a link to this project. I left it on GitHub and made it public so you guys could read this afterwards. But this app is all a Chrome app, and I started going down that path because I started as a Node.js app, which required hey, someone has to know something about Node, right? You create a Node app, that person better be a JavaScript developer and work on the server. So I wanted to make it available for more developers, for more people on different platforms. And a Chrome app seemed like the best way to do that. Kind of jumping around here a little bit, but let me go back to to-do.txt. So to-do.txt gives you a little bit of really cool formatting here. So you can add a create date by just putting a date in the format year, dash, month, dash, day, at the beginning of your text. So if you got this task text begins with a date, that ends up being the create date for your task. If you have an X at the beginning of your task and you've got a date following that X, that's the completed date. The next date will be the created date. Due dates are just I was going to try to highlight that, but I had this little copy feature in here. Due dates are just like metadata. So let me jump down to metadata. So metadata is any string of characters with a colon followed by any other string of characters. And what that does is it keeps that key and value as part of metadata for that task. So if you want a due date within iMDone, you use due, colon. But for to-do.txt, you could use whatever you want. A lot of the apps for to-do.txt, like on the iPhone or on Android or on a computer, Mac or otherwise, they use due, colon. And then tags are plus, and then your word. So if you roll that all up together and take a look at what the task looks like, you saw that task at the beginning of my presentation here. It's just some text. It's got this metadata, and it's got a date at the beginning. It's in the doing list. There it is. So let me just quick jump and show you another project that might make things a little bit easier to follow here. I don't want to show you anything that's proprietary, but I could show you the app itself. So let me get rid of some of this. So you can hide lists, which is really nice. You don't want to be too overwhelmed when you're trying to get stuff done. Usually I just keep everything but doing and this list of filters here available. So you can see here that you've got all of your tags that are part of the tasks. They're available here. And if you click them, it's going to filter by those. And you've got this nice little filter field here. You could put a regular expression in there and filter by that regular expression. You also have this capability to put like a filter link, right? So I created these filter links and I made them tasks, and they've got Markdown Markdown links in them. It gets a little bit meta here, but they have Markdown links in them that point to the filter. So it actually applies this filter by saying filter plus feature plus enhancement and filter. That allows you to then have this filter list, and if I put @filter in each of the filters will stay there, and I could just click around and whatnot. So you can change what you're seeing and so forth. Sorry, I clicked the wrong thing there. So if you click this little blue link, that takes you right to the file and the line number that the task is on. So that makes things really easy to get done. So here I'm coming in and I want to work on my enhancements. So I come in here and I look at, okay, what enhancements do I have to do right now so that I can progress. Show file name in the window title. That was something Michael told us. Make sure the title makes sense, right? So I might go here and I'll go, oh, let's go to that location, and then I could just start editing. And I'm right here and I'm in a text editor. I can go ahead and do that. And this is Ace Editor. If anybody's familiar with Ace, it's what's used on GitHub in a really minimal way, but it's also used on, I forget the name of it. There's a Cloud9 IDE. It's a Cloud IDE uses Ace. They're the ones who develop it. So you could just come in here and do that. If I wanted to, it's got code completion, just like everything else. It's a lot like, it looks a lot like Sublime. Doesn't have all the features of Sublime, but it's convenient. It has, all those other features. And if I want to click back, go back to my task, I can just do that. And it takes me back and it checks it. Say it's way down on the list, it's going to scroll to it, it's going to find it. So my 9-year-old son said to me today, he's like totally, for whatever reason, wild about guinea pigs and like gerbils, and he wants to like have a gerbil farm or something. So he says, you got to mention guinea pigs or gerbils. So it's so easy a guinea pig can do it. How's that? But what I love about it, and like I said, I use this every day. You can see I do my code in here with iMDone and with other projects that I'm working on with Dropler, because I don't have to leave my code. And for a developer, that's like nirvana, especially a freelancer who's got like 4 different clients they're working for, and they're using Pivotal Tracker one place, using this another place, using that another place. I recently added in a feature for that as well, because they're all going to require you to keep track of your tasks somewhere. And they're usually a roll-up, right? I mean, usually developers get a task. Am I wrong? I mean, let me know if I'm wrong here. But usually a developer gets a task, and it's a big thing. Like maybe it's a story, right? And they're going to have like 12 different files they're going to have to go in to modify, and tasks they're going to have to do, and subtask out around that. And you could do that within here, and the way that you do that is, I'm going to go back here, and you see this other metadata here, this profile and user. Well, you could have another piece of metadata. Say you call it Pivotal ID, right? And you can configure metadata to link to something else, right, for your project. So right here, I've configured it to link user to a filter. So see that filter popped up, user Piascik J. But I also configured profile to, well, it should be going to there. But maybe I got signed out. But you can see here, it went to that profile on GitHub. So you can link to external resources, and the way that you do that is just configuring it in the iMDone config file, which is located in here, right? And you add some meta information about that metadata. So if I just went into this config.json, you'll see I could add something here called Pivotal ID, and if I added a Pivotal ID to a task with the ID of the Pivotal ticket I'm working on, then it'll click and link right to that Pivotal thing if I put the URL template in there for it. And what's nice is Pivotal gives you this cool little feature. You just click on the ID and copy it, you know. Most of the tools do that because there are other ways to link things back and forth. So that's kind of a roundup of I'm done. Except maybe there's a couple more things here. So this README, you know, most projects have a README, so this got this little thing here you can click on to jump to your README. And if, you know, to add a project, you just have to, you know, click here and find a path here to add something or create one. Haven't done a lot of testing on the Mac. I have just like a VM myself to kind of kick around with it, so I've done a little bit there. But hopefully, you know, if you want to take a look at it and see if you think it can help you, I'd love to hear what you guys have to say about it. Free trial is kind of like forever right now, just because I'm trying to get people to give me feedback. So if you'd like, I'll spend a little time talking about Chrome apps, but I'd like to come back at a later date and talk about Chrome apps because there's a lot to cover there. But I'm going to switch gears over to Chrome apps if no one has any questions. Are there any questions about the tool? No? Okay. So let me just jump into the code here quick. So the first thing when building a Chrome app, let me just get a show of hands. So how many people have built a Chrome app or a Chrome extension? There's a few. So you guys can correct me if I'm wrong on anything, but I haven't done a ton on Chrome extensions. I built a Chrome extension for an app that was a predecessor to iMDone several years ago, and it was very simple as well. I mean, Chrome apps are pretty easy to build. They're just like any single page app that you might write. If you want to have a standalone app, it's very simple, like a packaged app, which is what iMDone is. Chrome has to be available, right, to install it and everything, and for it to run. But it acts just like a standalone app. You're not seeing Chrome right now. You're just seeing a window. You're building everything with HTML, JavaScript. Any packages you might want to use, libraries that you might want to use, you can use them in a Chrome app. There's no reason to do anything different than you do today for a single page app.
They have to be JavaScript libraries?
It is JavaScript, right.
So you can't use C extension or Java?
Well, I mean, you could, right? But you would have to suppose that you're on a platform, right? You'd have to have that, you know, so this only works on Unix because this C package is available there. Or this only works on Mac, or it doesn't work on Windows because I don't have the DLL. And you can't really bundle things up like that, I don't think, with a Chrome app. I've never tried it. But you want to stick to JavaScript as much as possible. That was one of the hard things about this project was I had to access the file system, you know? And, you know, Chrome apps and Chrome extensions aren't usually doing that. And watch the file system, too. So if a file changes on the outside, I want to pick up those tasks. I had to write my own file watchers because they haven't gotten them into the API yet. So that could be a problem with large projects. But they do have a very rich set of APIs that the Chrome, you know, you can find them on the Google website, the Chrome.runtime, Chrome.window, Chrome.everything. There's a pretty good website around it. But the basic, you know, the one main thing about this, and the way I have it structured is I just put all my source in app. I probably should have put it in source, but the one main piece of a Chrome app that's kind of the defining characteristic is this manifest file. So there's a manifest.json file at the root of your zip that you end up publishing to the Chrome store. And it has the information about the permissions that you want to have, that you know, I want to use storage, I want to use identity. I'm using identity.email because I want to read people's emails. Now you guys know I'm reading your email when you install it so that I won't be spamming you. Just so I know who the people are and I can send them updates and so forth. Clipboard write, so I could do that copy stuff that I did in there. Google APIs, so I can check for licenses and so forth. And you find all this information as you're going and digging deeper into Chrome apps and the docs around them. What to use those, you know, what to put in those permissions when you need to do something. File system, write, retain entries, directory. That's some stuff around the file system. And OAuth 2, you know. I doubt any of you guys are going to copy that down right now, that key, so I just left it in there in the clear. Your icons, and they're just PNGs, right? So that you could get that but you didn't get to see it because it's not on the screen right now. But there's a cool little icon that you might have saw when I showed my desktop before. That's the icon for this, and it appears in the corner sometimes in some systems. Versions, everything, all that other stuff. And then there's one really important piece in here, and that's the background script. That's the script that is going to start up when this app starts. That runs in a different context than the actual window, which actually makes things pretty interesting. You can run some, like 2 JavaScript processes going on at once. I'm thinking about leveraging that for the file watcher. But I could show you that background JS. It's very simple, and I've got a little task in here for me to fix that, put the watcher in here. But it's just saying that, Chrome app runtime on launched, create this window. And it's going to be index.html. I want it maximized, and I want it focused. So index.html, I'm using Haml, so, that's my index.html and Haml syntax. If you're not familiar, then you should be able to figure out what it is. But that's it. This is where the web app starts. There's nothing different about this and writing a web app for a URL, on the World Wide Web, on the internet. You write it the same way. The only difference is that you now have access to all the Chrome APIs, right? So you can look at Chrome file system, Chrome this, Chrome that, and you could go on from there. That's kind of the basics around Chrome app development. I'd love to go into more depth on some of the things that I used. Maybe I'll get in the queue for like a few weeks out or something like that, or a few months out rather, a few weeks out, a few months out, and see if we can talk more about that. Who would be interested in hearing more about Chrome apps? So about 10 people or so. It could be pretty good. Any questions? Or is everybody thirsty? Yeah.
Do Chrome apps that you develop have to be distributed through the Chrome App Store, or is there a way to just have a link on your website to just download it?
I believe there still is that capability. They did some changes around that. Google did some changes around that, I think, and it's more around updating, auto-updating of apps. But I think you could still distribute on your own site. You just have to conform to their standards of how to do that. And there's definitely documentation out there that I stumbled on when I was looking at auto-updating. So yeah, it's possible. You could also load an unpackaged app. So when I'm doing development, I got this cool little tool, this Chrome Apps and Extensions Developer tool. You can load an unpacked, and you could go to the extensions page in Chrome. If you go to I forget what the URL is, but it's one of those secret Chrome URLs. But if you install this Chrome Apps and Extensions Developer tool from the Chrome Web Store, it lets you do all kinds of fun things with your apps, but that you might already have installed. So I can reload this. I'm using Browserify and Grunt and do it using a watcher, so it rebuilds it, and I can just, when it rebuilds, reload it, so that I can get the latest code in here. And if I reload it now, you see it went away and now it's back, right? So now this just reloaded what was in the folders before, in that folder that I gave it the first time. So when you create this app, when you load an app locally, you're just loading it from a folder. So I load it from my build folder here. Let me just show you that quick. So build that's where everything gets built to, and the index.html is all built out. It's all compressed, there's no reason for it to be opened up and visible, but so that makes the dev process go a lot faster. But you have to have that infrastructure built in, right? Because there aren't a lot of tools out there to make Chrome app development super simple, like WYSIWYG tools and stuff like that. It's just more for people who are used to doing this kind of stuff. Any other questions? Yeah.
A comment. Have you seen extensionizer.com?
No, I haven't seen that.
Extension, it's like IZR.com. I came across it over the weekend, and it's a site that they got a project on GitHub, and it helps you generate boilerplate for an extension. It's select what features you want, what sites you want it to run on.
Right.
It's pretty cool.
That does sound neat. I mean, it builds you a project structure boilerplate?
Yeah, you download a zip file, and instructions again show you how to. You go to like Chrome extensions, load unpacked, point it to your folder.
There's your hello world, yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. Yeah, so, I mean, and you could do that kind of stuff yourself, too, because it's, like I said, it's pretty basic. It's pretty much and any framework you want to use. I'm using Backbone for this. You know, Bootstrap, Backbone, Font Awesome, you know, whatever you want to use. Any other questions?
Have you thought about using Atom Shell, or have you ever explored any of the other like wrappers, like there's a WebKit kind of?
Yeah, NodeWebkit. Yep. Yeah, I did actually. There was a NodeWebkit version of iMDone that I was developing for a while, and what I found was it wasn't as cross-platform as I wanted it to be. So I would load up this NodeWebkit app in Windows, and it would be extremely slow to start. And I went and checked all the boards, you know, what are people saying about it, Stack Exchange, all that other crap. And they're saying, well, it has to unzip this, and it has to do this and do that, and packaging was a pain in the ass. You know, I needed Xcode and whatever for the Mac. Or I had to go and find some kind of, you know, thing that someone built in order to make that work. So that's why I migrated to a Chrome app. And I think that Google's got Chrome apps on their roadmap long term. I've heard talk about Android, maybe the next version or several versions down the road being Chrome OS, which would be incredible for us, right? We're all JavaScript developers. I mean, imagine if Android, to build an app in Android, all it was JavaScript. That would be crazy, you know? Yeah. You know. So yeah, I did think about those, and Atom Shell is definitely a good alternative. But right now, I think Atom Shell is really only robust enough on the Mac. I know that Atom Editor is really kind of Mac based as well. They're expanding and they're deploying for more platforms. But
so can you can you right click on this app and then inspect elements and then start
you know what? That's a good question. On this version, you can, which is really cool for development, right? So when I'm developing the app and I load it unpacked, I can do that. So I can inspect this element, and here I am in this wonderful land of developer tools. But when you go in and then deploy this to the Chrome Web Store and someone installs it, that functionality is gone. I think you might still be able to F12 it. I'm not sure. But no, F12 isn't working for me on here. Yeah. So I don't think you can even F12 it. So that's kind of cool. If you got something that's proprietary, you don't want people to figure out what's going on behind the scenes. I'm not so concerned about it. I haven't seen a lot of people doing what I'm doing. And you know what? To be honest, when you're building apps that you're going to try to get out there for people to see, and you want all the feedback you can get, right? So I'm not really worried about having people steal stuff. But for development, perfect. It's like, that's nirvana. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you all very much. I appreciate it.
Cool. Thanks for coming, everyone. Oh, yeah. The videos will be on MadJS.com. If you'd like to watch past events for this one.
Get that ID down.
What?
You didn't get the ID down. You can grab it up.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, what were you doing that night? I forget.
I was there with my boys. I was playing. My boys were playing too.
Yeah.
Yeah, my number was they haven't played there in a while.